We are talking about fish again, and no, you cannot stop it. I'm going to keep doing this until that empty feeling goes away, forever, as far as I'm concerned. I want to start today with a story for you, a story about little me. When I was a kid, all I ever did was learn about animals and occasionally set things on fire. A lot of this learning was initially media consumption, be it river monsters, crocodile hunter, whatever I could get my hands on. Eventually, this would lead to literature and diagrams. I even brought a mini birdwatcher's guide every time I went outside for an entire year, but I was always looking for any real-world opportunities to learn more. This mostly resulted to fishing, as you can't investigate too many coyotes as a child without ending up on the lower end of the food chain. So today we're talking about my favorite fish, my most entertaining fish to catch. You will not only be getting fish knowledge, but fishing knowledge. So let's begin. First up is my default fish if I've got nothing particular on the mind. This would be the bass. Bass classification is an absolute mess. There are bass certified as different fish. There are other fish that shouldn't be classified as bass. It's a very rough learn. What I can do for you is pick the two most popular divisions. These are the black bass and the temperate bass. My apologies, as they don't have more memorable names to differentiate with. And because I need to confuse you even more, black bass are technically just sunfish. Temperate bass need their own separate video because they're all over the place like Kurt Cobain after taking too long in the bathroom. There's absolutely more than two different kinds of black bass, but I'm only doing the two important ones that I see here. We have all day, but I don't have that kind of patience. The first is going to be the most crash-out prone of all the bass, the smallmouth. I don't have many around me, but I do love fishing for them when I can. It's like having a short girlfriend for a brief stint of time. They're a little dart of pure aggression attempting to match the rage of a dying star until they fall asleep. Smallmouth bass are characterized by their light brown-greenish color, vertical stripes, and, well, their small mouth. Like most bass, they make their habitat pretty much anywhere, but some areas are better than others. Smallmouth bass tend to prefer areas that are a little on the colder side. They also tend to favor water with a bit more clarity to it. At the end of the day, it is still a very heavy ambush predator, so you have to drop a line where something should be lurking, and not the kind of lurking you do on your ex's Instagram. They typically hang out anywhere a shadow is going to be cast, in my experience, but that also goes for most other freshwater bass. Speaking of other bass, allow me to introduce you to the largemouth bass. This is the most recognizable bass in North America. Largemouth are going to be a lot more green and dark in coloration. You're usually not going to see the stripes very well, but you will see a very pronounced horizontal line, and the face is unmistakable. Largemouth bass are basically everywhere at this point, and it's not that bad. These typically aren't very active predators, leaning way more into the ambush side of things, and they also like to sit in the shadows, but they do more lounging about than nuke your line out of absolutely nowhere. When I fish for any bass, I tend to use a Texas rig setup as pictured here, but I will put forth a caution. Waiting too long to set the hook will fuck up the fish. Setting the hook applies to the jerk you give the line when it receives feedback indicating it's been bitten. Bass don't really have teeth. Think of them as a vacuum. They just inhale whatever it is that they are after, and no, before you ask, you cannot use them for that, you sick fuck. You want to set the hook in the lip, but if you waste time, you will hook the esophagus. Lips are rigid, it's easy to get a hook out of them. The esophagus is a squishy muscle. It's really goddamn difficult to get a hook out of that without special tools. Up next, the channel catfish. I love catching catfish, and I despise fishing for them. I will elaborate. All catfish are essentially blind bottom feeders, relying on their other senses and whiskers to find out where all the good stuff is. There are many ways to catch a catfish, with the most common, well, no, not most common, the most insane and sensationalist being noodling. That's something that rednecks invented, so you know it's good. It's where you blindly shove yourself in a catfish hole, get it angry enough to latch onto you, and then you rely on your buddy to rip you out of the hole while you've still got the catfish in your hands. We consider that a leisure activity here and still wonder why other countries are afraid of us. My catfish fishing experience goes a little more like this. You start out by finding a river, and preferably you do this on a boat. Figure out where in the river little fish would get bullied and carried by the current, position yourself upstream with a tremendously pungent bait, and wait. It doesn't have to be pretty, just don't make the hook blatantly obvious. The catfish will catch the smell after who knows how long, and then you actually have a very entertaining tug of war. If you're looking for a giant fish, yes, I would say this is the way to go. However, I find the aspect of waiting and not interacting with the bait for long periods of time to be agonizing. I much prefer a lure of some sort that involves frequent interactivity. I don't get to catch these fish often, but when I do, I am elated. I am speaking about the long-nosed gar. Gar in general are characterized by their long bodies and narrow, almost alligator-like snouts. I suppose that's how the alligator gar got their name to begin with, but we are talking about their little brothers. There are two prevailing issues that tend to vex me whenever I end up hooking a gar. I was never intending to, and they have incredibly bony faces. In fact, their jaws are so strong and rigid, they tend to ruin my lighter tackle that I use for different fish. If you have a shot at catching these, I would absolutely recommend it, and they are typically residing in just about any large body of water east of or connected to the Mississippi. That's the neat thing about rivers and their tributaries. If a fish can be found in one, they can likely be found in all of them. Storms, flooding, droughts, migration, accidents, literally just a guy named Steve being reckless. There's a million different reasons fish end up in strange places. Just know, especially with rivers, you are never fully aware of what exactly goes on underneath the water. I have caught 12 different types of fish within 50 meters of one another using the same lure on a river before. Nothing makes sense, and the only reason that I stopped catching fish on that lure was because, you guessed it, a gar took a bite of it and snapped off the treble hooks. By the way you catch gar, or the best things to use to catch gar, are things mimicking smaller fish. These three fish are not the same species, but they are incredibly close. When you think of the southern pike, northern pike, and musky, think of chimps, orangutans, and gorillas. If that doesn't work, think of cheeseburgers with a single, double, or triple patty stack. If that still doesn't work, I have no hope for you. These are essentially the same fish that are being released in different sizes upon exiting the factory. Southern pike are European, northern pike are pretty much everywhere, and musky are North American behemoths. We are only going to be talking about the big boys today. If you are routinely catching musky, it is legitimately one of the most impressive feats that a fisherman can lay claim to. It's not called the fish of 10,000 casts because it's readily willing to hop in your boat. People spend days trying to catch this fish. Here's the best thing about their habitat. You have your best guesses, and that's about it. Honestly, your best bet is to use giant equipment on somewhere a muskie has been caught before. Other than that, best of luck to you. They are thought to reside at around 15 to 25 feet, but they can travel well out of that range. They can also reside in waters ranging from freezing all the way up to nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit. At least they're a good lesson on how apex predators are harder to find. This is because they require significantly larger territories and prey populations. Now things get admittedly strange. Some people are going to be off-put by these next statements, and I don't really care. Asian carp around here are a highly invasive species. This means it's basically your responsibility to kill them. However, carp are a schooling fish, so there's a lot in a given area. Equipped with that information, we realized some fun can be had. What I'm saying is, we float down waterways at night with floodlights, bows, and spears to handle this problem in a greater volume than a rod and reel ever could. The practice of bow fishing involves a bow, as the name implies, and a nylon rope attached to your barbed arrows so you may haul in your fish. It is incredibly fun, mildly dangerous, and you never need to stop once you get started. So long as you are targeting the invasive Asian carp that ruin these marine ecosystems, you will be downright applauded for your service to the community. Let this be yet another reminder that killing isn't wrong, because wrong is just a matter of perspective. By the way, that argument does not stand up in a court of law, but does in war. Of course, that's not all of the fish, but that's enough fish for today. If you feel like it, you can join the Discord server linked in the description if you're old enough and want people to game with. Otherwise, if you don't mind, it's a full moon, so I have to go beat the Cajun cousin of a Sumatran werewolf in an arm wrestling competition. It's the only thing keeping Louisiana above water these days, but at this point, it's more of a personal favor to Robin Williams than anything else. Have a good night.